Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So today marks the return of High Voltage, one of the more popular limited time game modes in Marvel Snap. And not too much is changing with it compared to the last time, but there are two big changes I want to discuss. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the reward card, as well as some decks you can play to find success in the mode. Also, just a quick reminder before we dive into the high voltage stuff, Twitch drops are starting today. If you want to grab some resources, including some credits and a premium mystery variant, you can go watch Snap on Twitch. I'll have a link to my Twitch in the description. By the time this video goes up, I should be streaming, and I'll be streaming throughout the weekend and next week while drops are live. So make sure to get those while they are here. Drops are going to be going on for 1 week. If you weren't around the last time High Voltage happened, it's a pretty simple mode, and I think it is one of the better offerings, mainly because it's a very casual experience. The mode is all about giving you way more energy in shorter games. So the rules of the mode are pretty simple. On turn 1, you'll have somewhere between 2 and 5 energy. On turn 2, you'll have between 4 and 10 energy. And on turn 3, you'll have somewhere between 6 and 15 energy to use. This could be more based on locations, but that's just the natural amount of energy you will normally have each turn in this mode. Much like Sanctum, High Voltage comes with a ban list, though its ban list is significantly smaller. We have all the cards that were on the ban list before making a return, so Magic, Galactus, Black Widow, and Alioth, and one new addition to the ban list this time, which is Gambit. So no more popping off with the Gambit Exodia combos in High Voltage. And there's also a list of location bans. A lot of these are just things that are largely irrelevant in a 3-turn game, or restrict a 3-turn game a bit too much. So there's the list if you're curious which locations are going to be excluded for this event. In terms of other changes to the mode, the two biggest ones I think are, one, the fact that it's only running for 1 week. At the time of recording this, we don't have an exact view on the rewards track. I'm hoping they kind of shortened it due to shortening the length of the mode. But it is second dinner after all, so who knows if they're going to bother doing that or not. But it is worth noting that you do have a less time than previous High Voltages to actually play it and get the card. Normally it was 2 weeks, now it's 1 week. And speaking of the card, that's the other thing that I think is pretty big about this mode. It's the fact that the card in the mode seems significantly better than the previous offerings we've had in High Voltage. That is the first Ghost Rider. The first Ghost Rider is a 2/5 on reveal. Discard the lowest power card from your hand. Remove that card's power from this card. So obviously some really good synergy there with things like Gore the God Butcher and the original Ghost Rider. I think this is going to open up some pretty interesting combos. If you were around back in the day, you might remember people using Zabu in order to do a combo with Sif and Ghost Rider on the final turn of the game. And the first Ghost Rider opens up that possibility a lot more easily without the aid of a card like Zabu. Now, it is worth noting that if you discard a negative power card, it's not going to give this card power. You're not going to be able to be discarding your Hobgoblin and making the first Ghost Rider really massive. It's only going to take away positive power, not add negative power. Nonetheless, I think this is far and away the best card we have had in this mode. When you look at the other offerings we had in the past, in Agony and Lasher, those cards weren't very good. They were almost pack filler-y. I mean, there were some kind of neat things you could do with them, but nothing that really stuck in the larger metagame. They just seemed a little bit too niche and lower powered to build around, and I don't think that's going to be the case with the first Ghost Rider. So personally, if you're interested in this type of effect, I would definitely be putting in the effort to get the card via High Voltage. If you don't, it will be available in the token shop as a Series 4 card, like all the other new game mode card releases, but seems like a very good one to pick up for free, especially for a mode that is pretty low stakes and casual. It's not going to be something where people are really sweating it out and grinding it super hard like the other modes like Deadpool's Diner. All right, so now that we know a bit about the mode and some of the things that have changed, what about the decks that are going to be good for it? So I went through my backlog of decks that worked well for me in High Voltage and did a little bit of updating. So in general, if you haven't played High Voltage before, it's definitely a format that favors running more high impact, higher cost cards, or some more combo or interactive focused strategies, because you just have so much more energy and it's a lot more explosive than it is in normal Marvel Snap. There's also no snap mechanic in high voltage, so there's not really a benefit on trying to get people to double down. None of that really matters. You're just trying to get your quests done, as that gives you the most amount of progress, and you get a little bit of bonus progress if you win your games. But getting the quests done is the more important part here, because that'll give you significantly more progress. So the first deck here was one of my favorites from the last time around with high voltage. I did update it slightly with the new inclusion of Iron Patriot, but I've just always really enjoyed these Ultron Patriot Zoo style decks inside high voltage. Another new card you could consider adding here if you want to go more all in on the Ultron plan is Moonstone. I think that can be a good one as well. Some all-stars from previous high voltages were Ebony Maw and Baron Zemo. Since they're only 3 turns, Maw is essentially a 1/7 without too much downside, as long as you're not playing it on the first 2 turns, or you have a way to get into that lane in other ways via Ultron. Zemo, similar upside, a 3/5 that is often taking a Ebony Maw or other similarly large, low-cost card from the opponent's deck. Usually ends up being pretty good. Other than that, we're just running a bunch of the traditional Zoo and Ultron stuff, so we have ways to buff up our board. Khazar, Blue Marvel, Dazzler's a payoff for that. Patriot to juice up the drones some more. Shauna as another way of going wide if we don't find our Ultron. And then Cosmo. I do think Cosmo is kind of a necessary tech card in this game mode, because some of the lists we'll see later, people like to go all in on combos, namely the Black Panther Zola stuff. And Cosmo is just a surefire way of shutting that down. Another card you could consider in that spot, or maybe in place of Copycat if you don't have it, is something like Juggernaut. Also a good way to disrupt those combos, and has nice synergy with Iron Patriot, and is sometimes just a good thing to play to close out the game on the final turn. So if you like Zoo, if you like these kind of just super go wide strategies, I think this is a really solid way to go in high voltage, and it's worked very well for me both times in the past. Another all-star is Negative Tribunal. So combo decks are pretty prominent in this mode. You're trying to go as tall as possible, use all that excess energy. So what better way to do that than to put up hundreds of points with comboing Tribunal, Onslaught, Iron Man stuff. This deck is super high curve, and you basically are really hoping to get 4 energy on that first turn, so you can slam down a Wiccan, slam down a Mr. Negative, and then reap the benefits from it. Obviously, decks like this are prone to losing to interaction, so things that can kind of punt you out of the Onslaught lane or an Enchantress or something like that. We are running Super Scroll because mirrors were fairly common. If you're not seeing a lot of that, you could swap that to a tech card of your choice. Maybe you want something like Cosmo to protect your stuff from opposing interaction, or you could go with more ongoing effects or something to help reduce your costs even further, like Ravonna. But in general, this deck tries to get out a high impact card on the first turn of the game, and then we can accelerate into some ramp with Sarah, double that up with Onslaught, just start getting the Iron Man Mystique stuff going. It's just pretty easy to get a whole lot of power with these cards, and if your opponent isn't playing a deck with interaction, they usually will have a tough time going over the top of you. On the other side of things, we have a deck solely focused on interaction, and this is another one that I think will see a bit of an upgrade with the addition of Iron Patriot, but this is another one that I played last high voltage, and I liked it quite a bit. If you're not really into popping off with your own insane combos, the next best thing you can do is try and stop your opponent from popping off with their insane combos, and this deck does that really well. We have so much interaction. We have Shang-Chi, we have Enchantress, we have Cosmo. We have Leader to punish them if we get ahead, just to copy their biggest play on the final turn of the game. Juggernaut for the Iron Patriot, or just to steal a lane on the final turn. Morph is a really interesting card in this mode because people naturally gravitate towards having higher cost stuff in their hand, so slamming down a turn 1 Morph and having it turn into a 5 or 6 drop can be super duper strong. Other than that, we're just running some general good stuff here. Baron Zemo to steal the Ebony Maws, Copycat because people are running a lot of good effect stuff, and Galacta for a bit of stats. But yeah, if you're a fan of shutting down what opposing players are trying to do instead of building up some big combo yourself, this tech pile is a really solid choice. If you like putting down big numbers but aren't as into the all-in Tribunal negative combo stuff, I do think Spectrum will also be a very viable inclusion for this mode. Spectrum has had a lot of power added to it recently with cards like Sam Wilson and Moonstone, and it is just way better positioned in general for putting a large amount of numbers on the board, and with high voltage we can afford to run a bit greedier of a version of it, running things like Sarah for more reduction, which gives us a bit more of an explosive final turn. And as usual, we do want a little bit of tech here. We can go super tall with our Iron Man stuff, but I do think having Cosmo is just really, really valuable, just as a nod to the more go tall combo stuff that demands a bit of interaction. And speaking of go tall combo stuff, here we have that. So Black Panther, Zola, Wong, that kind of stuff generally is pretty good in this mode. It really depends how many people are running interaction. I find that the metagame in high voltage often shifts pretty quickly. We saw a ton of this in the first high voltage. In the second one, we saw more people running interaction out of the gate, so this kind of strategy wasn't quite as good as it was the first time around. And I'm curious to see if that happens again this time, or if we see another shakeup here where more people do go back into the all-in combo stuff. So the meta does kind of ebb and flow, because if people aren't running interaction, this combo stuff can just go really tall and go over a lot of stuff. I think most of the stuff, other than the negative Tribunal, has a tough time stacking up to the points that this deck puts out using the Panther combo. We also have Nimrod as a bit of a backup here. Get out a Nimrod early, start eating it up with Carnage and Venom. We can boost up our Panther or our Nimrod with Gwenpool. We have Null as another option to just have a big body after we have done some Zolaing, or if we want to just slam down a Null, so that way if they end up shanging our Panther or something, we still have a lot of power in another lane. Then we have just another big numbers deck. This one is pretty similar in spirit to the tech deck, not quite as heavy on the tech though. We are still running some good tech cards, Cosmo, Shang-Chi, Cannonball for a little bit of interaction, Legion to maybe do some game scamming with locations, but this deck is really more about just playing some generically good cards and some really big top end. Red Hulk, pretty good in this mode since people often float in energy, and Magneto can be another nod to some of the Wong combo stuff or the negative Tribunal stuff. Moving around their 3 and 4 cost cards can be very inconvenient for them. And then we have Agamoto. I'm not super sure on Agamoto, but I do think there is a reasonable chance that this card will be pretty good in the mode. All the spells seem rather good. The types of decks Agamoto likes being run in are generally decks that are already running a lot of cards that I think are decent in this mode. Specifically, something like Images of Icon also seems really good in this mode, where we have extra energy so we can get more stuff out early and benefit off that faster. We did just put in some of the other generic good cards here for the mode, like Zemo, and we are running more interaction. You can go a different direction if you want, running more threats, but I think for a deck like this, it's going to pay off running a bit more on the interaction side. And then last but not least, I did want to include a budget deck here. So if you're a newer player, I wanted to have something that is only pool 3 cards. I think if you are limited or on a budget and you don't have access to many of the Series 4 and 5 cards, Zoo decks, I think, are probably going to be your best way to go. You could also go for like a Mr. Negative strategy, but even that one really benefits, I think, a lot more off of some higher series cards. Whereas with Zoo, you can really get away with it without having anything above Series 3, in my opinion. It'll be a little bit worse than the other Patriot deck I showcased, but I think it should meaningfully compete and put up good numbers, and end of the day, probably isn't that much worse overall. Because these cards are just rather strong in this format, even in this budget iteration. And that's going to wrap it up for our day 1 high voltage breakdown. So as always, the links to the decks will be in the description if you want to grab those to import into the game for yourself. Let me know what you think about high voltage. Do you like high voltage? Do you not? Have you played it before? I know, generally speaking, most people seem to be a fan of this mode for no other reason than it's just a nice casual way to engage with Snap in a little bit of a different way compared to the other normal modes. That's definitely why I'm a fan of it personally, and I'm very excited to get my hands on the first Ghost Rider, because as far as event cards go, this seems like it might end up being the most impactful one since Cassandra Nova, in my personal opinion. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.